Hey YouTube, this is Besse here. I just wanted to show you my ultralight trike. It's powered by a Kohler engine, my reduction drive on it, and just give you a little bit of a overview of the whole trike. And 3.5 gallon tank. It's a 4-cycle engine. You find these on all kinds of things like generators and stump grinders and all kinds of good stuff. I used a Kohler engine mainly for its weight versus its size as far as the displacement. Another thing is there's a lot of aftermarket parts available for these things for beefing them up. As far as like Briggs and Stratton motors or the Generac motor, nothing wrong with them. They're fabulous engines. Like I said, it's just mainly availability of aftermarket parts, and the weight versus displacement is nice on these things. They're pretty light for what you're getting. This one's a 725cc engine, which they rate at 27 horse at 3600 RPM. Got Briggs and Stratton and a riding lawnmower, so have nothing against the Briggs and Stratton. Same thing with the snowblower over there. So let me give you a little bit of zoom in shots on some of these things. This is a reduction drive. I went with chain drive. This is what they call a 50 pitch or 5/8 inch chain, which is a whole lot bigger than like on motorcycles and things like that. Let's come around over here. Experimented around with a lot of the belt drives and that. Nothing wrong with belt drive. I've had them on all kinds of stuff. Mainly it's expense, price of the belt, price to put something like that together. It just costs a whole lot more. The whole point of this was to make something that's made out of over-the-counter type industrious parts. The reduction drive itself, what I do with these is I take and order in these linear shafts, custom made for me, and then what I use is a pre-made housing. Let me try to zoom away from that. And when the pre-made housing, this is aluminum, made out of the 6061 T6 aluminum. Then it's got 2 sets of bearings in here, ball bearing type. And the reason I like the double bearing, one is it keeps the shaft, any wobble out of the shaft, this is like extremely stiff, but flows real nice. Then what I do is have these water jet cut and then finish machining them here. And it's made out of 304 stainless. And let's see here, it's done in the Rotax bolt pattern. And then you can see, I use the Ultra prop on here. It's 4-blade. I've got 14-degree blocks in it right now. I had 13 degrees, so that would run me up to around 5,500 RPM. This is dropped down to right at 5,000 RPM at full throttle static. Let's see what else I got here. Tried a lot of different sprocket combinations, and this one seems to work the best. I don't know if you can see down in here, there's the 4 bolts that pull this thing tight and sandwich around the shaft, and that holds it very, very stable, as opposed to running those Allen screws in through the side. I'll show you an example of an early one. I don't know if you can see that or not. This had the double. There's one there, and there's one there. I didn't like these type. One is they have a tendency to, in a backlash setting where, like, once you've shut the engine off and it slaps back the other way, had a tendency at twisting, which was just scoring the heck out of the shaft, which made it a real bear if you decide to swap things out or anything. Here's an example of the chain here. You can see it's a beast. This one was on a different gear combination where I was trying different gear ratios and seeing what worked best. But I think this is rated at something like 5,000 pounds or something like that. You could pretty much lift my truck up and shake it up and down with it. And let's see, let me come over here. I want to show you. I order these engines in. This is what you get. By the time you strip all the armor plating off the thing, they come shipped like that around 94 pounds. Multitude of things need to be stripped off these things to get them down. There's all kinds of extra cowling and stuff built into them for an internal fan system and that. Basically, I don't know how much everybody knows about jetting carburetors and setting your timing, but if you set your timing right and you get your jetting right, you can sit here at full throttle forever and never even heat up. There's a lot of car conversion engine companies out there, and they'll tell you, oh, if it's overheating, oh, you don't have the cowling right and all this kind of stuff. If you look at one of my other YouTube video, there's a biplane that I built, and I had a 2332 engine that I mocked up, Volkswagen Type 1, and I had a 350 circle track Holly carburetor on there, and you know, you get set at full throttle over 500 pounds of thrust with the thing, and you're lucky to get the oil temp up on it. And that was with almost no, actually without the cowling at all on it, I could do that. So everything's in your jetting. So don't believe what everybody says. If you got an air-cooled engine, you got the jetting right. Same thing on dirt bikes. You know, how many times you'd sit there climbing a hill at low gear ratio, but high RPM, you're not overheating the bike, you know, so you just don't believe it when people tell you that, you know, you need more and more cowling and that. I've sat here with this thing for an hour at full throttle, and I was lucky to get the oil temp up on it. Some things that are shaved off this is, you can see the shininess there. That's an aftermarket flywheel. So the ones that come on them are cast iron. You don't want to throw over 3,600 RPM with them. You probably could get away with about 4,000 RPM, but they're very dangerous once you get above that. I've heard stories where they come apart and you basically got a 22-pound saw blade flying at your neighbor or something. Another thing that's important here is, if you can see, because I'm getting the RPM up on this, you need to be able to adjust your timing on this. So I've got this set at between 31 and 32 degrees for top dead center. Seems to be a real sweet spot for it. Got a good idle. I idle it at 2,000 RPM because you run through the reduction drive, you're not spinning the blade very fast. The other thing is getting it up off of normal motorcycle idle is you don't have to worry about the circuit and your carburetor for a smooth coming up off the idle. So if you've got a botched landing, you can just punch it and you go, because you're already at 2,000 RPM, so it just wraps. Let's see, another thing that's important, these things come with what's called a smart spark, and what that means I have no idea, but basically what it is the same thing as in the newer vehicles. You got an RPM limiter. So besides on the stock carburetors, which has got to go because it's just way too small, and they got a fixed jetting in them. So with airplane use or any kind of change in altitude use, you know, you're going from lean to rich to all kinds of stuff, and you're just not at optimal. If you live at a higher elevation to begin with, then you need to, you know, tune your carburetor with different jetting and that for that altitude. Also, if you're flying super high, you know, you're going to want to make sure that's corrected for. You're better rich than lean. So the little carburetor that comes on these things is just pretty much useless. And so that gets stripped off. I end up making up these intakes. If you look, it's just a 6061 T6 aluminum. Machine them out. This is kind of archaic, but it works real good, and it's very, very sturdy. Then I mount the Mikuni carburetor on here. I've tried different types of carburetors. I've even had the Solex off a Volkswagen engine on here, and it ran great. You know, I had accelerator pumps, they could just punch it and it just wrapped. But these seem to be pretty much a better universal carburetor, very inexpensive, you know, like $100 or a little over $100 to get one. And then time you get intake or your air cleaner and everything else on there, you know, you get less than $150 in the thing. What else is there? I went with the older style mags on this. Very, very simple. All you got is just the one wire. So, you know, it's like any mag. Once you get it started, it'll just keep running until you run out of fuel. And then all you're doing is hitting your off switch. And then I've got a key switch just like you do on a riding lawnmower. So you just hit the switch, starts up, it's electric start. Very important, electric start, so you ain't sitting there pulling your guts out on something with this kind of displacement. What else we got? On this one, I set it up so I got a oil pressure sending unit, and I've also got an oil temperature sending unit down below, tapped into the oil reservoir on it. So that runs down to the 2 gauges here, and then I just got one of those tiny tacks for the RPM. That's it for instrumentation. There's just not much to them. This thing, like I said, starts out at 94 pounds. Stripping everything off of it, it stripped well over 20 something pounds of dead weight off, and that was including taking that flywheel off that weighs 22 pounds. This flywheel weighs, I think it's around 11 pounds. And time I put the reduction drive back on it, and there was some other stuff stripped off, it put it probably close to, I haven't weighed this thing, but the reduction drive weighs 14 pounds. So by the time I stripped everything off of it, put the reduction drive on, should be around 84 pounds on this thing. And there again, it probably still needs to be weighed just to make sure. You can see it's pretty simple exhaust system. It's not like on a 2-cycle where you have to have it all tuned and everything. Just as long as you got enough blowing out, you're good to go. I've got a canister type too that I'm going to experiment around with and maybe drop it down low or set it up high and see how that works. When I was doing initial experiments with this, I had the big canister type. I also tapped in and put in a wide band oxygen sensor in it so that I could, see what my rich lean was, and, got it to where it was, right at 14.7 to 1 for the air to fuel ratio. So it was running this thing just runs real nice, real smooth. No heating problems at all. Let's see, what else? Battery. Okay, this is classical wet cell battery that I was using. It weighs, actually I just weighed it with my official digital fish scale, and it was 9.5 pounds. Okay, so trying to lighten things up, Wix Aircraft sells these little batteries here, and they're little solid state battery. Ballistic is who makes them. I think I paid like $100 for this thing, and being skeptical as I was reading on the thing, because it's if you can read that or not, but it says something like on here that it's good for from a 50cc to a 1800cc engine. Let's see, somewhere on here it's got some equivalents. Maybe it's on the inside. Sorry about the bouncing around. Let's see what we got here. It's around 15, I think, is the milliamps equivalent. This one here is a 14 amp hour battery, so they're real close in size, but this battery here weighs 1 pound. Actually, when they had one sitting there on the counter and I picked it up, I thought it was just a display, with nothing in it, and they were like, no, that's what it weighs. And I was like, no way. So I was like, I snagged the thing up, slapped it on here, and thinking, well, it probably ain't gonna have much power to crank this thing, but it actually seems to crank and hold a charge better than the battery that I had in there, and that's a regular motorcycle battery over there. So that was another, we got 8.5 pound savings right there. So between shaving all the armor plating off the engine and slapping that on there, I've saved probably close to almost 20 pounds off of what this thing was weighing or would have weighed. But the whole goal of this was to get into a 4-cycle engine. The other thing is Rotax stopped making the 447 and the 503, so it leaves a huge hole in the market, and you end up with the Kawasaki engines, which are fabulous engines, but no telling how long they'll keep those around, because might be the same reason as the Rotax, is they no longer use them in the snowmobiles and that, so just not much market in the way of ultralights and that. So let's go over some simple math here. I'll show you. I don't know if you can see this or not. I'll just point it at it and then tell you. This is the service manual for the Kohler engine, and this one here is the CH740. It's listed at 27 horse at 3600 RPM. The compression ratio is 9 to 1, and you can see shipping weight on this is 94 pounds. Like I said, I don't know how well this camera will pick up to read that. And let's see what we got for torque. Peak torque is 42.3 pounds, and that's at 2400 RPM. That was another thing, to try to keep this at around 5500 to 5000 RPM for the maximum on this, was so that you get that crossover at the magic 5252 number, where your horsepower and torque cross curves. So you end up kind of maximizing both those. You get really efficiency at that, or the best compromise of efficiency. Let's see, we got fuel consumption. Went ahead and did the math on it, which is, you know, boring to pretty much everybody, but I guess me. But it basically comes down to, if you were doing 5,300 RPM, it should be a consumption around 3.4 gallons per hour. And then at 75% power, which is 4,000 RPM, you're getting a 2.6 gallons per hour. It's a little bit better than that, and mainly that's just because this is, you know, the perfect math, and the efficiency of an engine is not anywhere near that. So you're probably talking worst scenarios about 2.5 gallons an hour, you know, and that's at your cruise. And you might even find it's better than that. I've done that same thing with a biplane that I'd built, and theoretically it should have been burning like 7.5 gallons an hour, and it was burning somewhere between 5 and 6, and that was really putting it to it, and aerobatics and all kinds of stuff. So you can see the efficiency of the engine makes a big difference there, and temperature outside and what you got to jet it at. Another thing is, whenever you're experimenting around with engines, especially for aircraft use, you want to make sure the amount of fuel coming from your tank getting to your engine is sufficient. Don't just think that you can run out, and this happened to me, where I went out and bought a fuel pump from one of these Volkswagen conversion guys and slapped it on that black airplane, and found out it was at full throttle doing static test. You know, I literally was running out of gas while I was at full throttle. So trying to take off and, you know, do a climb out or something and run out of gas isn't the best thing to have happen to you. So luckily I caught that and switched over to a totally different system. Actually, I scrapped the whole engine and everything, eBayed it, and started from scratch and did what I knew to do. Simple calculation factor ends up something like 1.06 is this magic factor they seem to keep coming up with. Is what happens is, what you want is 3.6 mils per second for a 3.4 gallons per hour consumption. So if you know what your engine should consume, then you can actually convert that to mils or milliliters per second. So if you're filling a little small graduated cylinder, or you take one of these kind of syringes you get for giving kids medicines and cut off the bottom of it, or pull out the plunger and actually fill that, you can do a calculation and figure this out. So you should end up about 1.6 mils per second times whatever the gallons per hour that you should have. As long as you come up with that calculation, you should be good to go on making sure you got enough fuel running up to the engine, so you're not running out at full throttle. Let's see, what else do we have? This here was it was a Falker Eindecker 3 that I designed and built. Probably getting reflection off of the light overhead. And I had this engine in this aircraft, so I flew it 2 times, ended up selling the engine. I had a fully TIG welded frame there. Actually, the frame itself I displayed up there at Air Venture in 2005 as a proof of concept for TIG welding aluminum frames, and the whole frame weighed 32 pounds. With this engine, it was just a monster. Like I said, I flew it twice and ended up selling. The guy just wanted the body only, so away it went. I kept the engine. I ended up building the trike after that, and it's been pretty fun. Trying to think if there's anything else I'm missing on this. So basically changed carburetor, strip off all the extra plating, installed the reduction drive, flywheel, mags. A lot of wiring came off with that Smart Spark, so that simplified the wiring system on it. Just put a simple squeeze bulb off of a boat on there, and I got a 3.5 gallon tank, but if you put a 5 gallon tank on there, it'd be that much better. And we changed out, let's see, exhaust. Not much more, so it's staying pretty basic to it. Internal stock parts, you know, I tore this thing down, looked at it, nowhere. Called Kohler to ask them, you know, hey, what kind of life expectancy on these engines? They said they recommend no less than 2,000 hours on no matter what the application before tear down. They told me they had 2 engines. One was had been running for 5 years nonstop, and another one had been running for 7 years nonstop. I don't know what they were on. They might have just been idling for all I know, but you know, that was what they claimed. That, and they do put these things on stump grinders, and you know, the zero radius mowers have these, and those guys really put those things through the paces. I've talked to some of them guys, and they said, well, they're not getting that many hours out of them, but then again, they're, you know, getting full of grass and, you know, heating up pretty good because you're sitting right there at the ground level. You know, as far as what we got, you know, we're compressing air, you know, and you're reducing the mass of the flywheel because we basically got another flywheel back here. Another thing is chain tension. You know, I've had people ask me, you know, well, what about the pulse and the chain and stuff? I don't feel it. I've had belt drive on this exact same thing and was running belt drives. The reason I didn't like the belt drive is I had a situation where one of the belts started to fray and come apart, and I wasn't even flying it or nothing. It was just strictly doing ground tests and stuff and static run-ups and that. So when you go to the more expensive belts, you know, you can get into 80 or 100 bucks real quick in a good belt. And it just, I don't know, I just didn't find it worth it. The alignment was good, everything was fine. I was just, you know, maybe it was a bad belt, I don't know, but I didn't feel like trying to take off, you know, flying over a wooded area with a belt coming apart. Spacing on the chain, what I found is I can just bolt this thing at the lowest setting so there's slop in it. Just like on the old dirt bikes and everything else, there's slop in it and it doesn't hurt a thing. Matter of fact, because it's floating like that, it seems to smoothen it out. I've tried tightening it and it just loosens itself anyway because there's so much, you know, force pulling down on it. So it ended up loosening. I just left it alone. It's at the lowest setting and it's sloppy and it's smooth as glass. And I've ran, you know, I don't know how many hours it's been on this now because I got one of those tiny tacks that you can reset. So kids have reset it a couple of times on me. So I'm guessing probably about 30 hours on this engine, and one ain't even wearing the paint off the gears yet. You know, the industrious coating they put on, or oxidized coating, it's not even scraped that off yet. I don't know if you can see the shape of it or not, but yeah, changed like indestructible on this thing. And I think another great application for this would be for the airboats, and I'm thinking of building up an engine and the whole 9 yards, so you can just slap it on the back of a John boat, clamp it down, and kind of modulate and incorporate a whole seat and everything into it. So all you do is sit down, clamp it on, sit down, you know, fire it up and take off. And this is probably putting out a little over 200 pounds of thrust. So on a, you know, 16-foot John boat, that'd chuck that thing along pretty good. I think if I was doing the airboat, it'd probably be better to go back to the 13-degree blocks in here, so to give you a lot more torque, but you're not trying to get up to 70, 80 mile an hour in your boat, which would be pretty easy because this thing, right now I can run it between the two roads in the subdivision, be up to 42 mile an hour. So, you know, if you was on water and no friction, I think you get some pretty dangerous speeds out of it. So you're better off going with less pitch, which is going to give you a lot more power. So if you're cutting through some shallows or something like that, and you got a lot of weeds in that, you're just going to rip right through it or up and over, you know, small stumps or something pretty easy. But I think that's probably the next venture I'll dabble into. But anybody wants to know anything about this or need some help building one, or if you want a whole engine, let me know. I'll put a email link at the bottom of this. It's kind of a pretty primitive video I'm doing here, but if you're interested, I've had that with the Volkswagen engine, and I had 3 people, you know, wanted one, so I ended up, you know, building, and I think I built 2 of them and then shipped one in just parts assembly to somebody, so they seem to be pretty happy with them. I know I was with the Volkswagen engine. I'm real happy with this. This thing's turned out great. I'm gonna cut this off. I'm gonna wheel this thing outside, try to set up the tripod and get some footage of it running, and I'll just cut it from there, and probably won't say anything else after this, but just to let you know what's going on with it. And happy YouTubing. Bye, guys. Clear prop.